They don't salute you anymore, Hank. You're not a Marine. You're just an old man with a limp. That's what the teenager in the red hoodie said before shoving him into the street. His laugh echoed against the storefront windows like a hammer on glass. Hank Albright, 90 years old and wrapped in a fraying wool coat with a silver eagle, globe, and anchor pin rusted at the edges, landed hard against the curb, his cane snapping beneath him like dry bone. The sky above him didn't care. Neither did the strangers who watched and said nothing. And for a moment, the world seemed perfectly fine letting one more veteran bleed into the pavement. Until 20 minutes later, when the Marines showed up. And if you agree that respect shouldn't require a uniform, or a tragedy, or a viral video, then like and subscribe, because some people deserve to be remembered before they're broken. It started like any other slow morning in Hillgrove, the kind of small town where stop signs lasted longer than conversations, and the biggest scandal was which neighbor's dog had chewed whose fence. But at 7:42 a.m., Hank stepped out of his one-bedroom apartment wearing the same thing he did every Thursday morning. A faded olive coat from the Korean War era, a neatly pressed white shirt, black trousers, and a battered pair of boots that still clicked with purpose, even if his left leg dragged a little. On his cap, the old Marine Corps insignia sat tilted like it had gotten tired of waiting for someone to ask about it. He always walked the same path, down Cypress Avenue, past the hardware store, past the bus stop with the graffiti-covered bench, to Millie's Bakery. He didn't talk much, didn't interrupt anyone, just nodded to those who saw him. Most didn't. But that morning, for teenagers did. They were standing outside the bakery, vaping something sweet and stupid, shoving each other like puppies trying to prove who barked loudest. One had a phone out, already recording, because nowadays cruelty doesn't count unless it's captured. Hank moved past them slowly. He didn't make eye contact. That was his mistake. The kid in red stepped into his path, held out an arm like a barrier. "Hey Gramps, where you off to? Gonna teach us how to invade Normandy." Another laughed. "Or maybe tell us about when dinosaurs roamed the DMV?" Hank didn't say a word. Just try to step around them. That's when the shove came. It wasn't hard, not by their standards. Just enough to remind him that gravity still had hands. He hit the concrete shoulder first. His hat fell into the gutter. His cane broke clean in two. One boot came off. The boys laughed. A woman gasped but didn't move. A man sipping coffee behind the glass window of the bakery looked down, then looked away. No one came outside. Not yet. But across the street, inside a pickup parked under a dead oak tree, someone put down their newspaper. A man with short-cropped gray hair. Big hands. Scar above his brow like a lightning strike. He watched as the boys wandered off, high-fiving like they'd won something. The man stepped out of the truck slowly, like someone trained not to move unless it mattered. He walked over to Hank. "Sir." Hank coughed but waved him off. "I'm all right," he muttered. "Seen worse." The man nodded. "So have I." Then he made a call. He didn't yell, didn't threaten, just dialed a number. Said 6 words. "Full circle. You need to come now." And that was it. 20 minutes later, the streets around Millie's Bakery weren't empty anymore. 5 black SUVs, identical and silent, rolled in like they'd rehearsed the route. They parked in a V formation. Doors opened. Men and they walked Hank all the way back to his apartment. 1 Marine on each side of him, 2 ahead, 1 behind, a formation no different than if he were still active duty, still a commander, still leading men through enemy terrain. The town didn't say much, but it watched. From porches, from windows, from school buses paused at the intersection. At the front steps of Hank's building, Lieutenant Mallory paused and turned to the gathering behind them. "This man," he said firmly, once pulled 3 wounded men from a burning half-track under sniper fire. He didn't ask their names, didn't care where they came from. He just moved. He just saved them. And today, not one of you saved him from a sidewalk. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was deserved. Inside Hank's apartment, there was a box on the shelf he hadn't opened since 1972. A shadow box with cracked glass, a folded flag behind it, and metals so rare that even Mallory paused before reaching for them. "Sir, may I?" Hank nodded slowly. Mallory lifted the silver star with reverent fingers, then the Navy cross. The air in the room seemed to grow heavier. A young Marine snapped a photo. Within minutes, it was on every military thread, every vet group, every forum that still believed in quiet valor. Hank said nothing, just sat in his chair and looked out the window as the town remembered him. Not the man who limped past their storefronts every week, but the Marine who had once fought through ice and gunfire so someone else's son could live. And across the street, the teenager in red, now quiet, held Hank's broken cane in his hands like a weapon he didn't understand. He didn't run. He didn't speak. He just stood there and watched. The story wasn't over. It had only just begun. The story of what happened to Hank spread faster than the laughter that once followed his fall, only this time, it wasn't whispered behind coffee shop counters or snuck into group chats. It was passed like scripture, solemn and sharp, from parent to teacher, from veteran to student, from town hall to national news. The photo of Hank's bruised hands resting on his fractured cane with Lieutenant Mallory standing behind him, dress blues gleaming, had gone viral by nightfall. No hashtags. No edits. Just a caption beneath it. This is not how you treat someone who bled for you. And suddenly, the world was paying attention to a forgotten corner of Hillgrove, where a boy with a phone and too much arrogance had triggered something far bigger than a shove. That Saturday morning, the town square was no longer just a stoplight and a flag. It was filled with the sound of boots, not stopping in anger, but marching in memory. Marines, veterans, firefighters, a small brass band from the local high school, trying not to cry through the first notes of the national anthem. The teenager in red, now identified as Brandon Cole, stood off to the side with his parents, his hoodie gone, replaced by an ill-fitting dress shirt, sweat darkening the collar. He didn't speak, didn't dare look up. And across from him, flanked by Marines and town officials, sat Hank Albright, not in uniform, but in something more powerful, a simple gray suit with a single ribbon pinned to the breast. No medals, no stars, just one ribbon, the Navy and Marine Corps Medal, awarded for non-combat heroism, something no one in the crowd had ever seen in person. A local news anchor tried to approach with a microphone. Hank waved her off. "This ain't about a headline," he muttered. "It's about a lesson." Lieutenant Mallory took the mic instead and stood before the crowd. "Some of you think this is about punishment. It's not. We didn't come here to cancel a teenager. We came to remind a town what honor looks like. We came so that maybe the next time someone sees an old man walking alone, they'll remember who stood for them before they could stand on their own." The crowd stirred, murmurs of guilt, recognition, awakening. And then something no one expected happened. Mallory looked at Brandon. "Son," he said, "bring it here." Brandon blinked. His mother gave a small nod, eyes glassy with apology. The boy stepped forward, hands trembling, holding something wrapped in cloth. When he reached Hank, he unwrapped it slowly. The cane. Fixed, not replaced, not bought anew. The same cane, splinted, sanded, repainted, polished to a dull shine. I tried to fix it the way you had it," Brandon whispered, his voice small but shaking. "I even looked up how to carve the notches. I saw they were for each year of service." Hank didn't speak for a moment. He just stared at the boy. And then, in front of everyone, he reached out, took the cane, and nodded. "You remembered more than I thought you could." The audience, frozen in silence, exhaled all at once. Hank turned toward the podium. "I ain't special," he said. "But I am tired of seeing people think that being young means you can't carry weight. You can. You just don't want to until it's yours. Well, now it is. That cane he just handed back to me? He's gonna carry it again. Every Sunday. On walks. With me. Until he learns not just how to hold it, but how to stand." There was no applause. Just the sound of respect. The kind that doesn't clap but stands taller. Brandon nodded, silent tears cutting down his cheek. Later that afternoon, as the crowd dispersed and news vans retreated, a smaller group gathered at the Veterans Memorial near the park. It was there that Hank leaned down and added a name to the bench, not his own, but of friends who never made it back from Chosin Reservoir. As he carved the letters with a shaking hand, Brandon held the cane upright, steady, without being asked. "You feel it," Hank said without looking up. Brandon swallowed. "It's heavy." Hank nodded. "Good. Now you're starting to understand." By the time the leaves began to change that fall, the incident that started with a shove had reshaped not just one boy, but an entire town. Hillgrove no longer whispered its guilt. It wore it, repurposed it, built it into something tangible. The mayor proposed a new program, Walk with Honor, where every high school senior was required to spend 10 hours accompanying a local veteran each semester. Some called it forced humility. Others called it long overdue. And Hank? He didn't want a statue, didn't want a plaque. But what he did get was a bench outside Millie's bakery, engraved with one line that he never asked for. He got up. "So we could learn to stand." Brandon Cole, once just a name in a disciplinary file, now walked Hank every Sunday, rain or shine. He didn't do it for redemption anymore. He did it because he couldn't imagine not doing it. They talked about things slowly. About war, yes, but also about quiet. About the kind of silence that follows you home and never really leaves. One Sunday, Hank brought him something wrapped in cloth. Brandon assumed it was food. It wasn't. It was the cane. The same one. "I don't need it anymore," Hank said softly. "But you might." Brandon hesitated. "Sir, it's not a punishment," Hank interrupted. "It's a responsibility. Every time you feel that weight, remember what you almost forgot." That week, Brandon gave a speech at school during Veterans Day assembly. He didn't talk about war. He talked about falling, and what it means to help someone stand back up. By the time he was done, the auditorium was silent, not out of politeness, but because every student there had seen the video, but now they finally understood the man in it. Afterward, Hank stood in the back, cap in hand. He didn't wave, didn't smile, but he nodded once, the same way he always had. When Hank passed away peacefully 2 years later, it wasn't quiet. The funeral wasn't a headline, but it might as well have been. Hundreds attended, veterans, cadets, kids he never met, all lined up shoulder to shoulder as 6 Marines carried him down the old church aisle. And at the front of the procession, walking steadily with the cane Hank had once carried through his hardest winters, was Brandon, no longer the boy in red, but a man in uniform, a lance corporal in the United States Marine Corps. When asked later what changed him, Brandon simply said, "He let me carry the weight until it became mine." Back in Hillgrove, a new sign was placed at the town's edge beneath the welcome banner. It didn't mention the incident. It didn't name the teenager. It didn't even list the medals. It just said, "In memory of Staff Sergeant Henry Albright, the man who taught us how to walk forward." And beside that sign, year after year, someone leaves a folded flag, a pair of old boots, and a cane. No note, no camera, just remembrance. Because some heroes don't need history books. They just need one moment, one witness, and one town willing to change because of them.